Hi there. So we're live now, I think.
Yeah, I think we are live. I'm just checking on Facebook just to be sure.
Yeah, me too. Let's see if I can
All right.
find it on Facebook. Hmm.
Okay, we seem to be okay. Guys, can you just give us a thumbs up if you can hear us? Those watching us on Facebook. Let's just give it a few minutes to build up.
Sure, I'm trying to find it myself on Facebook discussions.
Guys, can you hear us? Can you just give us a thumbs up? Okay, it seems all right. So, hello everyone. Welcome to at another live session from Nikon, a wonderful initiative during these challenging times where we are all kind of locked up and confined to our homes. Um, it's very important to keep a very positive mindset during these tough times. And of course, we'll be through this very, very soon. So during these times when we are kind of slowed down our pace, it's important to enhance our knowledge. And I think there's been no better time to update all that we have to and focus on things which can keep us running. Because photography, I know for all of us, it's a escape from all that we do, and it's also our refuge. And I think this is the best time that photography could come to our rescue. And with that in mind, let's begin today's session. Today's session is going to be about portraits, and today I am joined all the way from Australia by David Lazar. David Lazar is a very good friend of mine. We are part of Atlas of Humanity, which is a collective of portrait photographers. And yeah, so his and my style kind of goes in the same wavelength, and that's the reason why he is with us today. David, can you come in?
Yes, hello everybody. How are you all? It's nice to be here, and thanks for coming and joining us for our live stream. And yeah, I agree with Subodh that photography this is a great time now to be really getting into photography. It's perfect. You have lots of free time perhaps, and editing photos and taking new photos. And maybe we'll try to give you some tips about portrait photography today, and maybe you can implement them with the people that are in your home, hopefully with some of our tips and ideas and techniques. So I hope you enjoy
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. So David is a photographer who travels a lot. Even I travel a lot. So both of us are on a break right now for good, I guess. Yeah. So we can run through our archives and dig in our old pictures and revisit all the memories that we had through all these years. So it's a good time for both of us and most of us to take a break and
Yeah.
rethink all the things that we have done.
Yeah, no one's got an excuse anymore to say that they haven't had time to edit their latest or the past photos from last year. We've all got time now to get to those photos. So yeah, I've been editing photos from India for the last few weeks, from my last year's trip and my this year's trip as well. So I'll put them together to make a new India gallery.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
fun. It's funny that last year during April, me and David met in Bhutan. We just
Mm,
happened to see each other there. And today,
mm.
this April, after a year, we are online on Nikon Live right now. So it's a very strange world. Yeah, things can go around.
Yeah, we met twice in Bhutan, and then we met again in India just in
Holi
a few
last month.
months ago at the Holi Festival. Yeah, that was
You're right.
February, March. Yeah, March.
You're right.
Yeah,
Uh,
out of all the thousands of people there in Holi, we just happened to see each other, which was a coincidence. And I had no idea
yeah,
Subodh, that you would be there, but I wasn't surprised.
that's
But
how
yeah,
it
you
works.
came out of an alley
Sometimes.
and said hi, and hey. But
Yeah.
as with Holi, the festival, there's so many people and there's so much madness, you kind of have to just keep moving forward. So we didn't get a lot of time to talk then. But yeah, great to talk to you again now. And yeah, let's talk about portrait photography, which is
Yeah.
what I certainly love. That's my main style of photography.
Yes, yes. So before we move to today's session, just a reminder of all that things that are coming up. There's a whole lineup of photographers who are doing Nikon Live in the coming weeks. I think there are 10 weeks of photography courses running right now. And I'll be having 5 sessions, one being today, and next is on April 15th. when I talk of editing workflow, where I show you many of my before-after images and a bit of tips and tricks on how I edit my pictures. On April 22, I have a session on composition, where we talk not just about portrait photography, but photography in general. And on April 29th, I'll be having a video session. I'm quite new to videography, but I do try my best. I do try to say certain stories. So storytelling with video, that is the topic for April 29th. We'll run through Final Cut and etc. And on May 6th, I'll be talking about Nikon gears, because I've been shooting Nikon for last 10 years now, and I have used so many gears of Nikon. So we'll look at all the things that you can do with Nikon gears, be it from a basic crop sensor camera or the high-end D5. So the whole range will be covered. A lot of lenses will be covered, advantages of all these wonderful gears. So that's coming up in the next few weeks. So moving on, if you don't follow us on Instagram, you can feel free to follow us in the shown handles. And if you make any pictures out of this session with your family, you can always tag us, and we'll definitely look into your pictures and give our feedbacks. I think even David would be more than willing to do that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so, I've just managed to find the live stream chat, and hi Samir from Kenya. Good to have you here. I'm sure there's people from all around the world, in Africa and in the Middle East, tuning in, and probably other countries too. So,
guys, feel free to leave your comments. If you have any comments, just write it down. We'll be having a look at it as and when we can. So moving to the gears, which is the very crucial part of our photography. And when it comes to me, I use Nikon D5 and D4S as my two bodies, and usually they're coupled with a 2470 and a 7200. So I mostly stick to these gears because I am more of a low light shooter. I like my pictures to be very dark. On the other hand, David has his own preferences to gears, so I would let him speak.
Yeah, so I'm a Nikon user also. I've been doing photography for 15 years. I started around 2005. And yeah, I've always used Nikon cameras. I'm currently using Nikon D800, and I have my two lenses, the 24-70, which is the lens I use most of the time. I've also got a zoom lens, the Nikon 28-300 millimeters, for those times when the subject is far away, but it's not used as much. So yeah, I'm very minimalist with my gear. I don't travel with much. I don't carry much, just like a sling bag, and very inconspicuous. And it simply has my D800 and the 24-70 on most of the time. I've got that 28-300 zoom lens also in that sling bag. So it's very, very minimal and light, and I kind of like to be free and not too heavy and uncomfortable, so I can walk a lot when I'm traveling, and yeah, and meet people without showing all the gear. It was kind of the original idea of being so minimalist with it all. Yeah, so I always plan to continue using Nikon, and I'm looking forward to using a mirrorless camera soon. I'm sure next year I'll have a Nikon mirrorless camera, but for now I'm still on the DSLR.
Perfect. So moving on to today's session, before we begin to show you our pictures, we need to understand one thing, which is why we do what we do. Every photographer, every now and then, needs to stop and ask themselves why they do what they do. For example, you may be doing wildlife, you may be doing cityscapes, landscapes, in our case, portraits. You always need to know why you do what you do, and I'm sure David has something to add on this on these lines. David, why do you do what you do?
Yeah, well, I was just inspired to do it from seeing other people's portraits. Like, I saw other people's portraits, and I thought, I wish I could do that. I had an emotional connection to portraits, especially travel portraits, people from different ethnicities, different cultures. I was just, I don't know why, but I had an emotional reaction when I saw these portraits. And I remember thinking back in 2005, I wanted to take photos like that. I wish I could take photos like that. So I kind of just gradually, year after year, worked on that and traveled more and tried to meet people and forced myself to interact with people in order to get more opportunities to then have the control to photograph people and do the close-up portraits. Yeah, most of my basically all of my photography is very working together. It's I don't do so much street photography. I'm not a journalist. I'm an artistic photographer, and I love to interact with people and work together to create hopefully a beautiful image. and a portrait of the person that they would feel very happy with and represents them faithfully. And yeah, and how do I do that? Well, as I said, I did spend a long time just sort of forcing myself and pushing myself to talk to people when I traveled and talk to strangers and interact. There's certain tricks you can do, like learning a bit of the language and just saying a few words in that language, and look at what they're doing and maybe try to join in or make a comment. Or certainly try to be funny and try to make a joke and be lighthearted. And I find most people when I travel are interested in interested in me being in their country. So especially the countries I travel to, which is mainly, countries that are very hospitable, countries in Asia and the Middle East and Africa and Latin America. So that's how I do it. But I also run photography tours, luminous journeys. So for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been doing that. So a lot of my portraits now are coming from these tours, but it's still the same techniques and same mindset that I want to interact with people, spend a bit of time with them. I want them to be happy. I want them to have a nice connection for that moment. Yeah, and try to take a beautiful portrait of them that they would be really happy with.
Right.
And you guys can probably work with people in your family to try some of these techniques out that we're going to talk about later. Yeah. Even though we're really showing a lot about all of our travel work. Yeah. Taking portraits it doesn't matter if it's out in another country or if it's in your own home. It's sort of a lot of the same concepts, I guess. Yeah,
that's true. And also, it's also see what portraits does is it helps you capture the vanishing cultures, because today we are living in a very fast modernizing world and things are changing very rapidly. People are adopting very quickly to the new lifestyle. So what we capture could also serve as a documentation for the future generations, because what is today may not be there tomorrow. What was yesterday is not here today. So it's a very, very fast changing world, and our portraits definitely is something that can remain as evidence to how it was in the future. Yeah, that's what I feel.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I like the idea of showing people who otherwise would never travel to some of these countries what life is like there and what people are like there, and how lovely and wonderful and beautiful people can be in all sorts of countries that they wouldn't know much about otherwise. So yeah, it's good for sharing the world around with other people.
That's true. Moving to the very first topic of today on how to make better portraits. Me and David have discussed this session, and we decided to break it up into a number of sections so that it becomes very easy for you to understand. To begin with, there is the classic portraits. What we mean to say by classic portraits is a very simplified version of portraits. If you look at Mona Lisa, for example, one of the most famous paintings ever made, it is a very, very simple portrait of that particular person. There's not a lot of elements which are contributing there. It's just about the person. If I show you an example, for example, this picture from Ladakh, this girl, there are a number of ways I could have made this image, but I decided to keep it very simple, very classy, and to the point, because the person has so much of character and so much of emotions running through her face. So it was very logical for me to just do it very, very simple way. And that's the classic portrait, something that you can definitely try at home with your family, with your kids or your wife, and you can bring out pictures of this kind. You don't really have to travel somewhere to make this kind of pictures. You can always work it out right at your home if you know the background and light and etc. So always try to keep it simple when you start, and start with something very, very classy. And as far as composition goes, you can keep your eyes open for all the pictures which are coming up, and they will mostly follow the same composition rules, which are certain composition rules. In this case, the composition rule is symmetry, wherein if you divide the picture into two halves, and if you look at this picture, the center line runs through her nose. That's how you create a symmetrical composition in portraits. But at the same time, don't forget the very old rule, which is rule of thirds. It's very basic, but it always works. Even if you look at this picture and break it into rule of thirds, you will see that her eyes fall on the upper horizontal line of rule of thirds. So it's two composition rules. One is symmetry, other one is rule of thirds. So try to put all these things together to make a very balanced image.
Yeah, I love the symmetry in your last photo there, Subodh. I mean, symmetry, yeah, we see that in nature, like flowers, butterflies. I think there's something very comforting and we connect with perfect symmetry. So yeah, I really love symmetrical shots. And this one is kind of symmetrical, I guess. This is a geiko or geisha I shot in Kyoto in Japan. He's a little bit on the angle, a little bit. Yeah, sometimes it's nice to be a little bit, having something break the symmetry just a little bit. Yeah, it's very classic portrait. She's just sitting there and facing the camera. Yeah, but she does have, her body is a little bit on an angle, so that's a bit of a trick, of course, is to put the body on the angle and turn the face
Yeah,
a little bit. But yeah, the light is actually coming from an electronic lamp that was in the room. I don't travel with flashes, but and usually all of my photos are normally natural light, but this one's a bit different because there wasn't a lamp there, which I put right near her face, obviously just off camera to make it as bright as possible.
that's right.
Yeah, and her, I think, eyes pretty yeah, rule of thirds, face is up a third. Yeah, the eye is kind of in the middle there.
Yeah.
It's another
Just to add to this,
technique.
the composition here is something we call dominant eye, which is nothing but the eye which is closer to the photographer, or in case of you, it's the viewer, the eye which is closer to the viewer. So that eye falls in the center of the frame. And that is the rule which is being followed here, because the person is in an inclined angle. So one of the eyes is much more sharper and it's closer to the camera. And that falls right in the center of the center line. And rule of thirds, of course, it still follows rule of thirds. Very, very beautiful image from David. This image is from Ladakh again. I just met her there. She's a tourist. And again, if you look at the composition rule, is the same old symmetry and rule of thirds at the same time.
Perfect symmetry, that one, yeah.
Thank you. I know we don't have a symmetry line in our camera. When we look through our viewfinder, we don't get this line. So you need to be almost accurate. And then once you reach your Lightroom or Photoshop, you can always crop your picture a bit to make it a perfect symmetry. There's nothing wrong in cropping a few inches. Yeah.
In editing, you can always get that totally perfect. All my photos, I work on them very hard and very carefully, I should say, in Photoshop. Or Lightroom, actually, I do the composition, I do the crop first in Lightroom. I spend a very long time just trying to get everything perfect for the composition before I continue then working on it and doing other things. But yeah, making sure that balance is there so that there's the same amount of space either side of the eye or the face, such as in this case, is right in the middle there pretty much. This is a boy from Varanasi in India.
Okay.
Bang, symmetrical composition, but he does have that pan there, which is a posing idea that I've given him, and that puts a little bit off symmetry. So maybe that was kind of nice to have that one thing a little bit not perfectly symmetrical. This is a posing idea that I have where someone leans forward, so he's not just standing straight. He's sitting on a stair or something on the ground, like on a raised bit of the ground, and he's leaning on his own knee. So he's leaning forward and he's got his arm up here. And by leaning on a surface, it could be like a table or something like that, it makes the body language more relaxed and personal. Like you're having a coffee with someone, you might be leaning forward on the table and really engaged in what they're saying. And then the idea, this technique, is sort of emulating that real intimacy, that you are really relaxed and feeling comfortable around each other. So yeah, often I get people to lean on something. Often there's not something to lean on, perhaps, but in this case, he can lean on his own knees because he's sitting on some sort of stair type ground.
That's right. That's right. So I think by now, the very first part of portraits is quite clear to everyone, which is the classic style. Just keep it simple. Don't add too many elements. Remove all the distractions and keep it to the point. Yeah, I think it makes sense. So now let's move to the next part, which is getting closer. Which is nothing but there are times when you want to really highlight the person's character so much that you go really, really close to the subject. For example, in this picture by David.
Yeah, so we're talking now about extreme close-ups. So before it was more just the classic shot, getting maybe the shoulders a little bit, chest and shoulders, and top of the head, maybe cutting a bit off the head. This is getting in really close, so cutting quite a lot off the head. And there's a mixture of zooming in with the 24 to 70. You can zoom into maybe 70 millimeters for a shot like that. So yeah, don't get too close to them because, if you put the camera really close to the face, you get distortion, which is very appealing in portrait photography or people photography. I really don't like distortion of the face. And so that comes when you put the camera really close to something or a person in this case. So yeah, it's good to have a bit of a zoom. So you can be back from the person and they feel more comfortable, and also the cropping in Photoshop or Lightroom later to get in that much. There's definitely a crop there too.
That's right.
There's a monk from Myanmar, and again, he's leaning on something. Actually, we can't see it because his arm's cropped out of it, but he's leaning on a surface just a little bit. Yeah, he's not leaning with his chin, but he's leaning his body on something. So he certainly looks relaxed. I think he's.
That's right.
Yeah, and I've got the robe to cover a bit of his face there, just as another idea. We'll talk later about things around the face, but that's something that you might see as a recurring theme in some of my work.
Yeah, and just to add to what David said, whenever you're getting closer, it's right that if you use kind of a wide angle, you may get a lot of distortion, and which may distort their face, which is not a good thing. So one thing you could do is zoom in also. As you go close, suppose you're using 24 to 70, use get close at 70 mm. First zoom and then go closer and do the shot. Every time you zoom, you're removing the distortion as well.
Yeah, that means it would get bigger, and maybe the features will be changing, and you can tell.
Yeah. Moving to the next one, which is mine. Cool. Again, a very close picture. I'm using I think a 2470 or 7200. I'm using a 7200 in this shot, and you don't always need the whole face, to tell the story. With portraits, you're always looking for certain characters or certain things that can add up to the picture. In this case, it's eyes which do all the talking. So always keep your perspective open. Don't always think that portrait is all about just the face. You can always play around and even tell the story with just the eyes. There are portraits where you can tell the story with the jewelry that a person wears. So you have to keep yourself open to possibilities. So don't just think of portraits as just the face.
Yeah, it's a creative way to shoot somebody. Very creative idea. Oh yeah, this is a boy from Brazil that I shot. We did the face painting session. I was invited to come and visit a place where they called Beija-Flor, where they get children to get off the street and try to give them activities and things to do to distract them from joining gangs or doing anything like that. So in this day, they were doing face painting. They asked me to come along. I was in Brazil, and I know the guy there who runs it. So yeah, but so for the portrait though, the idea was I would take everyone's portraits and then we printed them and gave them a copy. So yeah, in this case, certainly the eyes and the paint.
It's good to see the same color of eyes, like the background.
Yeah, just so lucky to find that kid. I mean, that's so unusual to find people with big green eyes like that. And if you do find someone with colorful eyes, you certainly, maybe want to try to take their photo. And obviously you can notice that he's around the green leaves, that we have that green theme running throughout the photo, the green paint, green eyes, and the green leaves. So that's that control element of moving him to be there. We'll talk about the backgrounds a bit more, but there's also a lot of overlapping with a lot of these shots. But I'm always looking at the background.
In this case, it's not a super close picture, but still it's comparatively closer to what you saw initially. When it comes to the classic portraits, we keep a bit of length from the chest to the head, but in this case, it's quite close in those terms. And again, it's to highlight the character of the person. If the person in the previous picture, in David's picture from Brazil, it was the eyes of the person, which is green. So he has definitely a reason to go very, very close to the person. In this case, it's the paint this kid is wearing. So always try to ask yourself the question, why you're getting close? What is it that's attracting you to go closer to the subject? So always that question has to be in your mind.
Yeah, what are you interested in here? Is it the large costume? Is it the dress? Is it just the eyes? Is it like your Holly photo? Or is it I got a question from Matt Schiffler about how to approach the planning stages of these photos. I guess every photo is a bit different. So the boy with the green face paint, it was planned, and that I was asked to come and visit the community center, but there's so much improvising, I think, and adapting. So looking to see who's around when you're there and just working with what's there, working with the background and looking for good light. In this case, the Myanmar photos is just walking around and exploring monasteries and cities and various places that a lot of people don't go. For this one, this was in a place in the north. Yeah, and then I just interacted with him and asked if I could take the photo, and asked him to hold the robe up like this. Yeah, I don't think there's much planning. A lot of the time, it's just adapting and improvising and being creative in the moment and finding opportunities, looking for them.
And it's beautiful that there are just two colors in the picture. One is the skin, other one is the red, which really helps in keeping your eyes focused on the subject. No
Yeah, I would
distraction.
almost say there's just one color. I think red is the main color. The skin, there's a brown color, I guess, but yeah, that's almost the same, similar to the red shade.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I certainly love the idea of one color in the photo, like the green shot before.
And here is one more shot, which is an example of getting closer to the subject. And here it's super close, and its forehead is cut, and it's quite really tight shot. Again, the reason is the character. He's carrying so much of colors on his face. I wanted to show all those details of turmeric powder on his face, which happens during that particular festival. So yes, there should be certain questions you need to ask before going close. Try to find that interesting elements.
Yeah, another monk from Myanmar. Yeah.
Both of us have a very close relationship with monks, I guess. I have a lot of
monks are very photogenic, I think. I mean, it's so fascinating to me, people of other religions, and especially one like the monks in Myanmar or any of the Buddhist countries. It's just so different from the Western world of Australia, where I'm from. So yeah, I think anyone who devotes their life to spiritualism, and it's really, really fascinating. And some of the clothes, the robes, and the shaved head is very, very interesting.
Preeti has a question on Facebook. Is it cropped? No, it's not a cropped picture, Preeti. I think there's a question for David. Can you just check the question, please?
Yeah, so talking about shooting very bright photos. Yeah, I really love bright photos. I just like something in the photo to be pure white almost, and then something to be pure black, like to have this really strong contrast of bright and dark. I'm very conscious of this, and in the way I edit all my photos, try to make the thing that you're supposed to look at first, the brightest thing in the photo, the whitest part of the photo. In this case, the eyes are very white, and then the skin is also very white. But you have to capture that already with the good light, and then you enhance it with the editing in Photoshop or Lightroom, and there's so many ways you can brighten something. For me, I use adjustment layers and layer masks. I'm using levels, so go to the adjustment layer and levels and move the white triangle to the left so that the photo gets brighter. Then the mask, invert it to be black with a white brush, then paint in the areas you want to reveal this brightness again. And I just enhance what was already captured. And same with the shadows. I make all the black folds darker and blacker than how it was captured. Even though there were shadows obviously in the robe in those same places, I make them blacker by painting in that area with an adjustment layer to really get that strong bright and dark. So yeah, it's good to always be conscious of how bright. Can you go brighter still? Yeah, I don't overexpose it. Yeah, I'm very careful to push it to the limit and not overexpose.
Yeah, and there is a question once more. Do you use any flash? I can answer for both of us. We don't use any flash.
No.
Right? Yeah. So moving on, again, example of close shots. Again, a very close-up of a kid in Bhutan. A lot of brights, a lot of blacks, as David was mentioning previously, which really adds to the contrast of the image and makes the image pop. So one last picture, which is again an example of close portraits. So that was the second part. After the classic portraits, we had the close ones, and now we go to the next part, which is getting high. Don't get wrong ideas with the title. We are not getting high on anything else. But what we mean to say is there are times when we make our subjects sit down and we shoot high angle. That's what we mean to say when we say get high. Examples are as here.
Yeah, that's another monk from Myanmar. Yeah, so I'm a little bit higher than him. I'm asking him to look up a little bit to the camera, not just being on the same level. You could almost demonstrate it here if I'm looking up a bit. Yeah, it creates larger eyes, brighter eyes. The eyes are showing more of the sky or reflecting more of the sky. And it also creates, I think, nice shapes with the jawline to separate it out a bit and get a bit of a jaw shape rather than this. I don't like shooting up at people, and I never look up at people in my shots. I mean, it can be done, anything we say, rules can be broken. There's nothing is the one right way to do anything. But certainly for me, I do like to either be on the same level or looking down very slightly. Yeah, and the eyes become brighter and a little bit bigger and wide open.
Right. Just to interfere in between all the questions that are coming in, we'll attend all the questions towards the end for sure. We'll look at all the questions and try to reply as many as possible. And in between, we'll pick up a few questions as well. Moving to the next one, again, getting high angle is the subject right now. And as you can see, the moment you go higher than the subject and make them look towards the camera, their eyes open up. So you get a big wide eye, and there will be a brilliant catch light because they're looking towards the light, mostly the sky or a window. So it really helps you in getting a very good connect with the subject, especially for the viewer who sees the picture.
Yeah, these are things to have in your mind, almost like as a list when you're out shooting. It's like one idea is the idea of looking up a little bit, and so you can do that sometimes when sometimes the light is really high above you, like the sky or something. There's no light coming in straight, so that's the time to look up a little bit. In this case, it's the same. It's the sky that's the light, and looking up more has made his eyes brighter. Yeah.
Right. So I think now it becomes quite easy to understand what we mean by saying when we say hi. And also, it's very easy way to clear the background. There are times when you can't really get a clear background. In that case, when you shoot them against the ground is usually one color. It's either brown or it's some other color. But at the end of the day, you have a very uniform color in the background. So there are times when you can't move the subject because they may be not interested in moving around, or maybe there's some other reasons. So in that case, if you just shoot them against the ground, you get a very, very clear background as well.
That's a great point. Yeah, looking down on someone, really like a bird's eye view, almost looking straight down, gets that cluttered background problem gone. It's usually the background of the ground is plain and fine enough. But yeah, as for how do I expose the photos, like I really use my eye and look at the back of the camera. I don't even look at the meter thing or anything. You know, you've got all the things you can make a change. If it's too bright, then I'll just make the shutter speed faster. Check it, like always testing, shooting, checking it in the back, making it brighter or darker depending on how I think it should look. I don't look at histograms or anything like that when I'm shooting. Yeah, you just override the camera's instinct, especially a photo like Subodh's here, which is the camera would always try to make this brighter now because he's obviously got it in a darker space, but just with the window to the outside bright light, the camera always gets this wrong. So even if you're shooting in P mode or some automatic mode, you can do exposure compensate and just make it darker than what the camera thinks. Or if you're in manual mode, then you make some settings that you think work and then check it. Then make the ISO a lot lower if it's too bright, or make the shutter speed lower or faster if it's too bright. You can change all those three variables, the shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, accordingly. So that's what I do. I just do it by eye, looking at the back and making the change on the fly quickly.
That's right. And speaking of getting high, again, you don't always have to make them sit on the floor and look down. There are times when you can just raise yourself higher than the subject, so they will automatically follow your camera, and their eyes will tend to open up. That's the reason I have put this picture here, where if I go to her eye level, maybe her eyes will be smaller. But the moment I start raising myself higher, and she starts looking a bit higher, the catch light and also the eyes tend to open up much, much more. So it's always good to direct your subjects to have their eyes wide open.
Yeah, same thing with this one. He's clearly looking up a bit, and it's the sun or the sky is reflecting better in his eyes and on his face. It's the Maasai warrior from Kenya. I think because we are using good light, like we're shooting the subject with good light on them, it's making the skin look, smooth and clear. If you had shadows on the skin, it can not look smooth and clear, and that would just be because you didn't have them angled the right way, perhaps. I'm always looking for where is the brightest light source, and then trying to angle the face to be directly towards that light, or maybe a bit to the side or something like that. One test I do is I look at the palm of my hand, and actually if you do that now, you look all around, the light's changing all over with the skin. So I'm looking for where's the brightest bit of in the room or outside, and angle it towards the brightest bit. I can see, that skin looks really good quality, bright skin. So that's one technique that I have to find the good light. I think from getting good light, the photos have that smooth skin look. I'm not doing blurring on the skin or anything for these shots.
And also, just to add, if you look at both of our pictures, whichever pictures we have shown so far, and even in the presentation ahead, you'll see that we always try to use a bouncing light. We're not trying to use the direct sunlight. Most of our pictures are done using the bouncing lights from the wall or from whatever it is. We always try to shoot away from the sun. So
natural light. It's not direct sunlight. If it's direct sunlight, then you get hard shadows on the face and those bad shadows. It's just the general sun out, the general bright sky, but you're not in the sun. but angled towards the bright bit of the world.
Sanjeev Soni is saying he's watching from Nairobi, Kenya. Very informative. Thank you, Sanjeev.
Thank you, Sanjay. So this is the one exception that I do have a flash on this photo. This was taken actually with my home with a softbox. So this is the one photo of mine that has an actual off-camera flash. Yeah, but we're talking now about side lighting, aren't we?
Yeah. No, we're not there. We're not there.
This is still looking up.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Salahuddin says he's watching from Pakistan and he needs some tips on how to use natural light. We'll get to natural lights in few minutes.
All right, let's keep moving.
So next is C. Now, again, to wrap up whatever we have talked so far, we talked of classic portraits, we talked of close-up portraits, and we talked of getting higher angle. Now we're talking of adding some extra elements to your pictures to spice it up. So what you can do is, one of the easiest ways to do is using the hands of your subjects or someone around the subject. You'll understand what we say or what we mean when you see the picture. In this case, I could have easily gone for a standard portrait of the kid, but rather I decided to use a bit more elements. Like I asked him to just, close his hands. He was actually having his hands crossed, and then I called his guardian. They are putting their hands on the kid's shoulder, and right away you create emotion. So always, try to work your scene. For example, this kid, I took a classic portrait. Then I decided, okay, let me do something more. So whenever you have an opportunity to explore, try to add one or two elements extra and build up the scene to generate an emotion. So if you go to the next picture from David.
Yeah, very similar concept here. So now it's not just shooting the face only, but we're trying to add something else into the photo. So it's like the next level, next step forward. This is where really creativity, creative thinking is required, and it's fun and it's challenging. But yeah, and the idea of having something close to the face, hands is an easy one to use because there's always hands. We all have hands, but also you can look for other things like material or leaves or something else that can be near the face. And when you have something near the face, it seems to draw attention to the eyes, makes the eyes stand out more with something around the face or near the face. So this is when a bit of direction is required and a bit of a vision, an idea, and you can have a list of ideas in your head. Try it next time you're shooting someone. Think about having some hands around the face, something natural. Try to imagine how they naturally would hold themselves with hands. It can look really cliche and silly, but you can also make it look natural, because a lot of the time we do just sit around with hands near our face.
Yeah, work the scene and you'll automatically begin to get a flow of how things can work. Yeah. So here is another picture of using the hands, and here in this case the lady, and I just asked her to just sit with her hands on her face. So if you remember Steve Jobs' biography, which is all across the stores and bookstores. So even Steve Jobs has that a picture with his hands on his beard. So you need to watch a lot of pictures on internet and keep it in your mind, or take a screenshot, keep it in your phone, so that you understand how and where you can use those ideas. You don't have to copy it exactly, but you're just trying to do it in your own way. So always try to be inspired.
Yeah, exactly. Remember, you can save photos that you like and look back at them and analyze them, and then try to be inspired or emulate them to some extent when you're out shooting yourself. Yeah, two hands in the face. So I think it makes your attention to her eyes even more. It's more powerful. Yeah, there's a lady from Bali, Indonesia. And the next lady is from Lesotho in Lesotho. Yeah. And I've asked her to put her hand near the face there. And sometimes I might even have to just give a bit of instruction about how much space there should be between the fingers if they would not do it in a way that looks natural. I can show it myself, like imagine this, or you can, give some advice sometimes.
There's a question. There's a question whether you use reflectors. I don't use any reflectors. Do you, David?
No, I don't. Occasionally I've used it here and there, but no, I don't travel with reflectors. I've done it in Australia with some shooting around in Australia, but all these are not with reflector.
Right.
And I've cut the hair off a little bit there, you might notice. Yeah, we're focusing on the eyes. There was a question earlier about why did I cut the turban off the boy from India? Well, it's because the photo's not as much about the turban and his costume as his face, because his eyes are so powerful and strong. So I think it works just fine to cut the head maybe not right on the very top of the head, but substantially through it, but not too close to the eyes. There's like a sweet spot. Yeah, you can see a lot of my close-up portraits. I cut the head a bit.
Someone is, I think, Hubab. Hubab is asking whether it's important. Isn't it important to capture the whole head?
Right.
Not really. You don't
It's
really
about
need
the
the
eyes
whole.
here and the face. Yeah, we don't need to see her far away because it's less powerful. It's more intimate if you're up close with the person.
Yeah. So no, Hubab, you don't need always the whole head. You can always chop it to the forehead, or you can even, if you want to keep the whole thing, it's fine. It's just a personal call at the given moment. So going to the next section, which is background, probably the second most important thing, or maybe the third most important thing in portrait photography is background. Along with person himself, which is the subject, there is light, and then there is background. If you work with these three, it makes your portrait really, really powerful, because
they're almost all equally important, I suppose.
all are important. Yeah, as I was saying, I don't
background
like
is so important.
the word
Yeah.
other way. So
how to rank them or rate them.
Yeah.
Then this is a boy in India, of course, with the Krishna face paint. And so the background, as Subodh said, is just so important. And I'm always considering the background in all of my portraits. I'm often looking for a background before I even is shooting a person. In this case, I knew, of course, I was shooting this boy with the blue makeup for the Krishna look, but I went around looking for backgrounds while he was getting his makeup done, actually. So this was an organized shoot I did on my photo tour. But I spent time, walking around and looking, where is a nice wall? And then I found this nice blue wall, which I thought would complement him because he's blue. I like to have the minimal color scheme in the photos, like we talked about before. Not too many colors, one color, two colors, not too many. Makes the photo more focused and more powerful. Yeah, so let's look at a few more photos and look at their backgrounds and see how much they help the portrait.
Yeah. One thing I would like to add is whenever you're walking as a travel photographer and you're trying to make pictures of strangers, you never know when you'll find a very interesting face. So don't just look at, try to find a face, but at the same time, as you are walking on the streets, keep looking at the walls. Maybe there's a doorway, maybe there's a wall. Just keep registering them in your head, because once you find the person, you can always bring them back to that point and make a picture, rather than find a person and then think what to do. It's always good to be ready with the background, and then you find the person and then utilize how you want to execute the picture. So in this case, this kid was found in between, like a festival, and there's a lot of things there. It's not very easy to find a good background in this particular area. But here the background was a tent, which was just around the corner. So once I found the person, I took him to that particular tent, and I used the tent as my background and took the shot. So always try to clear your background. Keep it as minimal as possible so that all the focus goes to the person. Another example is here. It was during the Holi festival. I find this kid very good looking, good colors and all that. But if I take his picture right there, it's good enough if I go close to him and I make a picture with the green background. But as you can see, there's a door, and the doorway is always a good black background. So I take the kid and I shift him to the door. I make the other person move, and then we have this. So it's always easy to clear your background, but it's very, very important to clear your background as well. So always make that.
Yeah, always looking for backgrounds.
Yeah.
It's so, a lot of people focus on the person themselves, and just focus on shooting the person, but you have to be thinking about the entire photo, and the background is such a big part of that. So again, for this lady, she's a Chin tribe lady from Myanmar with her face tattoos. Instead of just shooting her wherever she was, I walked around the village and looked and explored and found this beautiful painted, young girl's face on the veranda on a balcony. So she's outside. It's actually not just the background, though. Of course, you've got to find a good background with good light on that background. In this case, it's the bright sky just out there, but she's under the awning, under the cover of the balcony. So this is like a sweet spot where someone's sort of in a darkish area, but there's a big, bright, open area in front of them, like a window or a doorway. In this case, a balcony. But the background obviously really complements the lady because there's a face, and she has a face very similar. But also the colors, the skin color, the brown is very similar to the brown of the wall behind. So, very conscious choice to find that, to shoot her against that wall.
Right. Okay, going to the next one. This is one of my pictures from Ladakh. And again, the background here is a green wall and with a very, very good light coming in through the door. And the reason why I used green door in this case is because of the complementary colors. Whenever you have a warm and a cool working together, they really help complement the picture. It really makes a very good color contrast. And that's the reason why I use the wall here.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and why shooting in horizontal or vertical? How do you choose which one? I think it's an instinct, and I guess it depends on the background and how much you want to feature the background. In this case, yeah, I don't know, honestly. I have never really thought about why. I guess if you really just want to focus on the face, the vertical, you could really fill the frame with just the face. But if you like the background and you want to include a bit more of that, then horizontal will be working well for that.
That's
But,
true.
yeah.
I think usually the answer will lie at that given moment when you're about to shoot. When you look through your camera, when you see it horizontally and vertically, you will make the call right there. Depending on what you're seeing through your viewfinder, whether it's a vertical or a horizontal shot. Yeah.
Yeah, this photo is also about his robes. It's a bigger, wider scene, so it's not just about only his eyes and face. It's about his robes and the hands as well. So the horizontal makes sense, I guess, to show the body as well.
Right.
Right. Let's move on. I like this.
We are kind of running out of time, so a little bit more quicker.
Sure.
Next part would be environmental. So now we are adding more stuff. We talked about adding hands as an extra element and all those little things. But now we are talking of bigger picture. This is when you go 2 steps back from your subject and show where he is and what he's doing and all the other things that add up to the environmental portraits. When you see the examples, I'm sure it will be very, very clear.
Yeah, so it's not about the face this time. It's about the whole body and the scene that the person's in. So this is another way to shoot somebody. I mean, not all faces maybe have great character or very powerful faces, and sometimes in that case, you can still shoot that person in a wider sense and make it an environmental portrait in this case. I mean, yeah. And this is obviously there's a lot to show off here because of the drums. That's a great cultural thing in Indonesia. This is a Dayak tribe in Borneo, Indonesia. Yeah, this time I wanted to get all of the costume and the headdress. I thought that was more interesting than just his face alone. So, yeah.
It helps you tell the bigger story. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it still requires that background thing, thinking about what the background's going to be. And yeah, in this case, you've got the background is telling the story. So it's great.
In this case, in this village, they heavily rely on bamboo. So I want to tell that story of how they use bamboo to make their home, their floor, their wall, all that things they use are around bamboos. So when you want to tell those bigger stories, it's always good to step back and show a bit more. But again, whatever you want to show has to add up. It's not like the background just creates a distraction. You always need to make sure that background adds up because you're showing everything.
Yeah, environmental portrait. I'm interested in the layers as well, something behind, like different people behind the main subject. In this case, there's someone else there to fill in the space. It's Bali.
Yeah. This again, the way to use environment. For example, here I found this mother and the kid, and it's a beautiful moment. There's a good light coming in through the door, and the place where I found them was not this. What you see now is what is, how it was converted into a photograph. Moment I found them, I looked around, I saw this window with the heart shape, and then I placed them in this particular point, and then you create an environmental portrait where this heart tells a bigger story. Yeah. So those little things add up to make a photograph a better photograph.
And we're talking about portraits. The concept of a portrait photograph is that you have to interact with the person often and move them around and control it and put it together. Environmental portraits can be the same thing, especially if the point of the photo is art. We're trying to make artistic photos that also faithfully represent the culture. But in all these photos, there's an interaction of there's an element of interaction and moving someone to be with that background behind them. Yeah, and that's totally fine because that's the nature of portraiture. You have to put it together often. There's no rule that says you must shoot the person only where they are. Yeah.
In environmental portraits, it's very important to remember that there are two stories. There are two elements which are telling the story of the picture. One is the subject, of course, the subject in this case, the Japanese lady, but at the same time, the background tells the story as well. So in this case, those doors, we always associate them with Japan, and that's how you tell a story. Don't use a background which doesn't add up. So always try to get the complementary background. Very, very important. Moving on. Yeah, here we have another picture from a little village in India, and all those things that you see behind them is an animal which they sacrifice every year. So there are 3 generations of animals behind him. So I wanted to tell that story of how they sacrifice these animals and they keep the skull as a souvenir. So there are 3 generations: him, his father, and his grandfather, and all those skulls represent those 3 generations. So you always need to ask the question why you're choosing the background and what story does it tell.
Yeah, all right, let's keep moving forward to the lighting section now, I think. Yeah, thoughts on 85mm lens for portraits? Perfect, I think. Yeah, you can zoom in a little bit more. You don't have to be so close to the person, yet you can really fill the frame with their face, get a blurry background. Yeah, 85mm is great. I used to use a 24 to 85 Nikon lens, an older lens, but they don't make that anymore, I don't think. So it's just 70 now.
Coming to the next one, between that, I would just like to say that we have missed a lot of questions in this Facebook list. We conclude the live, we'll come back to the chat and we'll reply to each one of you. That's our assurance. Sure. Yeah. And moving on to the next part, which is conceptualizing. What we mean by that is, as a portrait photographer, we are not street photographers. We are not photojournalists as such. So we have the opportunity to stage our shots. In portraits, we are trying to create art, and when it comes to art, we have all the freedom to guide our subjects and create art out of the given situation. So, for example, in this picture, David.
Yeah, that's the concept, isn't it? The idea of having 3 people, perfect symmetry, 1 in the front, 2 behind. It's like in the smoke and the praying. Yeah, that's a sort of a concept, and to me, I love that creativity that you can get in photography. Yeah, this is challenging and creative and lots of fun to put together a shot in your mind and then try to execute it. And yeah, let's not put any restrictions on art. Art is this, you shouldn't do. Yeah, there's no one way to take a photo here. You can do stuff like this, of course, as long as it's, as I said, respectful to the people and they would be happy with this product, and I'm sure they would be. Yeah, so let's move on to the next one.
Yeah. So even I have a series of pictures which I do. Usually when I travel, I don't just carry cameras, but I also carry candles. That's kind of weird, but I do that. I carry candles to make these kind of pictures, like this has been created over and over again. So I'm trying to capture the culture of various corners of India using this similar concept. So once you start doing it again and again and again, it can create a nice kind of a mini project, which can run parallelly. So always try to explore your creative side and try to do something which can be, which can work in synchronization.
Yeah, so again, a concept. All right, let's move forward to get to the light, because that's also something else we should talk about.
Yeah, but you can just look at the pictures. These are all conceptualized pictures where we are trying to guide our subjects to do certain things for us in a very respectful way. So now
we want to create emotional artwork, so this is what we do. Yeah. Low-key.
So coming to the next part, which is low-key. Low-key is when you try to cut the light so much that only darkness and the subject remains in your picture. For example, in this picture from David, I think you can talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, this is an example of putting someone in a really dark space, and then there's a bit of light coming from a small window of some sort. In this case, it's a doorway, and he's facing that doorway, and then shooting him from the side. So yeah, this is what we call low light, low key. You could try this at home. You could, put someone find a really dark room that does have a window, like even a garage maybe, or somewhere. You could try a portrait of someone in your house during these times when you can't go out and do what we're doing here, which is travel photography. Look for a really dark room, but there's got to be that one window or doorway that has a bright outside going on, and you get them close to that and angle them towards that. So you get this nice range of black shadows that smoothly come into bright light. Yeah, it's very powerful, I think, to have a mixture of dark shadows, but it's got to be smooth shadows so we don't use the hard sunlight.
True. And even in this case, this is from Nagaland, and again, the concept is very similar. We put him against area where there is so little light, and the light is now coming from two windows from the other sides. So it kind of creates a rim light and very, very minimal and very, very low light.
Yeah, it's very cool, that photo.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
same
think,
concept. It's a dark workspace and he's near the doorway.
right. Same
And again, you could
here.
do that hand technique to find that light. Yeah, looking at the light, where does it look good off the skin? And if you were to stand near that doorway and angle your hand towards the doorway, you'd see that that light on the skin looks very nice.
That's right. So similar ideas. You can easily replicate these pictures in your home. Just make them stand near the window and use your curtains to make a darker background, etc. You just have to work around it. I'm sure you will find your way through to get these pictures. You have to underexpose your pictures. If you're shooting in manual mode, go to the negative side of the meter, or if you're shooting aperture priority, bracketing is one way to do it. Exposure compensation is the other way to do it. Take it to negatives, cut the light, and you'll get a very strong rim light kind of a situation.
That just means, don't follow the camera what it thinks is correct in these cases. You have to override what the camera thinks is correct. Check it yourself. Keep making it darker if need be. Go for dark, dark, dark. But yeah, these are very
That's a very good. That's a very good tip. Your camera can't do these pictures. You have to make this happen.
Yeah. So as people ask, how do you know how do you expose it right? Well, I just use my eye and look how it looks. And if it's too bright, then I'll just keep doing things to make it darker. Exposure compensate, faster shutter speed, lower ISO. Any of these things can get you there.
Yeah. And going to the next part, which is characters. When you travel, I mean, not right now, don't travel right now, but in the future, when you travel, there will be so many characters you come across on the streets. So always try to find those people who have some kind of appeal to them. Everyone can't be a portrait subject. So you have to be very choosy, and you need to ask your the question as to why they are your subject. Yeah. In this case, it's very evident that this guy has the character.
Yeah, we just flip through these. So yeah, looking for interesting faces, costumes. Yeah, that's a good travel photography trip tip.
And here we have a warrior who looks like he's waiting to be photographed. David, you can see the picture?
Yep, I can. Yep, their faces with character. Yeah, I'm just worried we're running out of time. Let's get to the lights.
Yeah, now we are at
the lights.
So when it comes to light, we are trying to keep it very, very simple. There are 3 kinds of light. There are 100 kinds of light. I'll not even argue about that because that will be a whole different session. But we just simplified it for you. There are 3 kinds of lights for portraits. One is the one which is coming from the side, one which is coming from the front, and one which is coming from the back. Side lit, back lit, and front lit. So let's talk of side lit, where the light is coming from the side. In this case, we have placed the subject in such a manner that the light comes from a diagonal angle. So it's not a front light, it's not a back light, it's a side light. That's what we're trying to convey here. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, imagine a softbox swap, and you would put the softbox off on the side. So you're kind of emulating that and angling the person so that the light is coming in on the side. I don't think most of my portraits are like this. Most of them are front on, and we'll get to that in a second. But sometimes it is on the side, and it does create some more of the black shadows, which makes it more dramatic. Looks good, I think, on older people with the wrinkles in the skin. What do you think, Subodh?
Absolutely, I 100% agree, because even my way has been that I always use it on people who are having wrinkles or older characters. The side light really, really works well to highlight each and every wrinkle on their face. And here
good for drama.
Light, yeah. So more pictures, and here's one more. And moving to the front light, this is something that I have seen that even David uses a lot of front light for younger people. Like this girl, David.
This is a girl from Bangladesh, and yeah, I met her one afternoon, and it was actually too dark to shoot. The sun had just set, so I didn't even shoot anything. But I asked her and the family if I could come back and visit the next afternoon a bit earlier, which I did do. So there's no point to me in taking a portrait of someone if the light's not great or quite right, too dark. So I came back the next day around 4 o'clock or something like that. I was invited into their house, and I got to have tea and meet the family. And she's just sitting on the stairs to the front of her house. But it's, like a dark undercovered part of the stairs in the front of the house, like an awning. But then there is a space between the buildings and the roofs and the awning, which is showing the very bright sky outside. So you get these very focused light coming in. You can see in her eyes, it almost looks like a flash, but it's not. It's a natural light.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's coming directly on her. She's angled straight towards the bright light source.
As you can see, when you get the front light, you get the shadows in the side of their face, and the face is well lit. That's what we mean to say when we say front light.
Only if she's in a dark space already with
Yes.
very close to the bright light. There's like a sweet spot. You have to move someone a bit closer or back to get them close to the bright light, but not in the sun. Yeah.
Even in this case, which the picture you saw in the initial part of the presentation, it's a front light. So
yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah,
that's the same girl, just different head scarf,
different angle. Yeah, and here again it's a front light, and one more. David, anything to add here?
Not so much, but yeah, I love front light. Nice and bright face. Let's really show off the face. That's what I'm interested with my portraits. Let's have a really clear, bright face.
Right. And then we have the backlight. After the side light and front light, we have the backlight. Sorry, guys, we have to rush through the session because we have 8 minutes to finish. Because I think we have one more live session coming up after this. So excuse us for running through. Backlight is when the sun is behind the subject. And it's a very, very tricky light. And usually for people like me and David, who don't really use a lot of, we don't use flash at all. So we have a tough time lighting up our subject with the sun behind this, behind the person. So we may have a comparatively lesser pictures for this, but here is one from David.
Yeah, so the only way I can do backlighting is if it's in that small amount of time in the early morning at sunrise and at sunset, when this is obviously it's very early in the morning at sunrise, or the sun's just come up. Maybe a few minutes later, it'll be too bright and you won't get to have the exposure good on both sides. So yeah, this easier obviously at sunset to do this. Maybe you can try this, go outside tomorrow and just when the sun's just setting, you can't shoot directly in your own property. Yeah, and with the sun shining directly behind the person, and there should be enough natural light. And the sun's not so strong. Usually the problem is the sun's way too strong behind someone, and then the face gets too dark. The camera can't handle the two exposures. Yeah, so backlighting works if you can be, like a sunset like this. The sun's just setting, but there's still enough light to balance from the front with the back.
Yeah, and another example, which as David said, during the sunrise in this case, and you get that nice rim light around the subject, and it's quite hard and tricky to get the face well exposed when you're going for a backlit image. So, but yeah, you can try your way. And if you're a flash user, if you're comfortable with flash, definitely you can do a lot of backlit images or even a reflector for that sake. Yeah. Coming to the last segment of a presentation, which is framing your subjects. So we talked of, we have created this whole presentation in a way that you go from close to wide to really, really wide. So framing is something that could be physical, or it could be using the light, it could be using various elements in the picture. I would let David talk about this picture.
Yeah, certainly. Framing, looking always like the background, it's the same thing. Looking for good backgrounds, looking for good framing devices, looking for good windows, curtains, something that can be around the person. It always seems to work and gets good focus onto the person. So that's a good technique to keep in your mind. Always looking for a good framing device.
Right. So moving on, this one from me and another from David, where we have the same colors, and the curtain itself forming the frame. Here's one more, and one more, and a lot of them within a couple of milliseconds, 4 different expressions. So our overall point is right now we are at home, so let's utilize the time and shoot our family, because this will be over. We'll all be back to our normal life. But once we go back to the same old life of ours, we can always look back at our pictures that we make during this time, and it will be a wonderful pictures which will always remind you of how things were at one point, because this is a very unique time that we are right now in. Anything to add, David?
Just to recap the main points, which I think you have to be very, very conscious of, is the background. Look for perfect backgrounds that complement the person. Always think about the background when you're shooting a person. It has to balance and match the person. And also the light, looking for being in a dark space with a bright opening to a window or a doorway to the light outside, or under a balcony or a rooftop, something. So yeah, looking for the good natural light. Yeah, man, thanks guys for watching, and you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at David Lazar Photo. If you want to see more of my photos, and of course, Subodh's got Instagram as well.
Yes. Thank you so much, David, for accepting my invitation to join me today. It was really wonderful.
We could do
It's
another
always,
one like this because there's so much to talk about.
yeah. We can definitely do that, and we will definitely have you back. That's for sure. So,
Wonderful, thanks.
to answer quick questions, I think we have 4 minutes left to 8. So, best settings for portraiture to avoid grain. Keep your ISO low. As simple as that. That's what brings in the grain.
Yeah, but sometimes you have to have a high ISO if you're shooting in a darker space. So it's all a little bit depends on the situation every time. Yeah, if you're getting grain, that's because the ISO is too high.
And it's okay to have ISO. Don't even worry about it.
Yeah, 800 is maybe maximum if you're worried. Depends on your camera too. Some cameras handle grain better than others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions. Me and David will definitely attend all the questions once we conclude.
Thanks very much, Bino. I'm glad you found it very informative. I hope you guys are all staying well, and yeah, have a good night.
Please stay home.
I look forward to reading through the comments again and just checking out anything we missed addressing.
Definitely.
But yeah, I hope we can have inspired you a little bit with our portraits, and I hope you can do some portrait shooting at home with your family.
Yes, sir.
Oh, hi there.
There you go. So, all well. Let's conclude. Thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks guys again for participating and joining, and see you again.
See ya.